I know folks are tired of the Chiefs, but folks are going to really start tripping when they start saying that Mahomes is actually better than Brady in the playoffs. It might be true. We'll talk about it here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You got that right. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen, and you can find us wherever you get podcasts, whether you listen to them or watch them. Make sure you get to that location each and every time and check in to make sure you do not miss an episode. An episode that is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/locked on NFL and use the code all lowercase locked on NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And hello to the everydayers. Glad to have you join us if it's your first time. I hope you enjoy it. And I have the use of local experts. And today, my local expert, as usual on Wednesday, is my man, David Harrison. And here's where we're going to go. Saints, they're dreaming big. A couple hours away from New Orleans. I know they hope their coach is a couple hours away where this search is going so far. The Lions get new. They get a new start with an old face. It's not the one you probably thought if you were thinking they were going to uh, promote from within. They kind of did, though, in a way, and we'll discuss that. Mahomes better than Brady in the playoffs. That is where we're going to start. David Harrison, first of all, thank you for being here. Glad to have you here. Nice run by your team this year. Fell a little bit short. Give you a chance to talk
Yeah.
about that experience with Washington so far this year.
Oh, I mean, it's been great, and obviously you never want to see those types of things come to an end. Everybody knows it has to come to an end, but you hope that
Mm-hmm.
it's the last, it's the last game of the season and your last team celebrating a win, and that's how it comes to an end. But unfortunately, that's not the way it always goes. Every other team is hoping to do the same thing. And look, when you turn the ball over 3 times before garbage time, right? Like the Jaden Daniels interception, I don't really hold against him as garbage time.
Right.
You got to throw it up there, see if you can make something happen. But when you turn the ball over 3 times during the course of the competitive part of the game, I mean, what are you going to do? Unfortunately, Wig, I made a bold prediction on a Commanders fan podcast I was invited on during the week leading up where I said I think Kenny Pickett might get into the game. And that was not quite the way that I thought it might happen.
No.
But
Absolutely
hey, I
not.
mean, look, if you took the over on 0.5 snaps by Kenny Pickett based off of what I said, you hit it. So
No
it is what it
doubt.
is.
No doubt about it. Well, there are a couple of guys we're about to talk about that are used to not being eliminated in the playoffs. That's Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. And the guys who are locked on Chiefs, of course, they're locked and loaded, ready to go to the big game in a couple of weeks or here in less than 2 weeks. And they're saying all kinds of stuff, but they kind of have a point here. It's facts over feelings. I want you to check this out.
This is where I feel for the other fans that hate the Chiefs and seeing them win so much. This is where I feel for them because it makes me laugh. It's so ridiculous, right? And so now you get the number 1, 2, and 3 quarterbacks in that order, and it is Patrick, Joe, and then Tom. I'm just saying it, Tom. We can talk later. To put them all back to back to back, that is so unique and so special beyond special. Like it's almost unfathomable if you're not a Chiefs fan just how good this guy is.
Well, and it goes further because Tom Brady played in 48 games to win 35. His career layoff percentage is around 71%. Mahomes, and let me back up for just a second. Peyton Manning, who most would say is probably a top 5 quarterback all time, or at least you would make an argument he's a top 5 quarterback of all time. He only had 14 wins in the playoffs. He played 27 games to get those 14 wins. His playoff winning percentage is 51%. Mahomes would have to lose his next 15 games
to match Peyton Manning.
to match Peyton Manning.
That's crazy.
Or to get close to Peyton Manning. And Tom Brady, greatest of all, a lot of people will say greatest of all time, 35 wins in 48 tries, 71%. Mahomes would have to lose his next 6 playoff games to have a playoff percentage that low.
All right, with all due respect to Kansas City, to Andy Reid, and to Patrick Mahomes, we saw what Andy Reid does against Bill Belichick coach. We saw Andy Reid in that era. See, this is the side-by-side thing, and I get the stats, David. They got to remember, Tom Brady went just about 10 years without winning a championship. You know why? Because other people were doing it. There was the Drew Breeses, and there was the Peyton Mannings, and there was the Ben Roethlisberger. So I know everybody loves this era of quarterbacks, and I do too. But you're comparing them to an era of quarterbacks where just about all of them, with the exception of Phillip Rivers, won championships. And throw Eli Manning in there too.
Yeah, I mean, look, this goes back to the old conversation of, our wins and losses quarterback stats. And I'll tell you, in the game of football, which is the most team-centric game of all the pro sports, wins and losses are not quarterback stats. You know what I mean? It also goes back to the old debate of who's the best player, who's the most accomplished player. Like, listen, you can talk about, is LeBron James more athletically gifted than Michael Jordan was? Yeah, he absolutely was. And the argument that you'll always get back is, well, science and medicine and training technique. Yeah, got it. LeBron James is younger. LeBron James was born in a more advanced time, athletically speaking, understood. The facts are still the facts. Now, what is a quarterback stat, however, is touchdown interception ratio. And even that is a little bit dependent, right? You got balls going off of receivers' hands. Some people don't realize this. Like, offensive linemen are actually trained on how to prevent a defensive lineman from getting his hand up and tipping it past the line of scrimmage. Like, that's actually part of an offensive lineman's duty. So even if balls are getting deflected at the line of scrimmage, a lot of times people say, well, the quarterback has to make sure that doesn't happen. There's actually an offensive line responsibility in that as well. So even that is a dependent stat, right? But when you look at that, Patrick Mahomes at this stage in his career is above or is ahead of Tom Brady in touchdown passes and has fewer interceptions than Tom Brady does. Look, truthfully, I know why people get in these conversations. I'm more of the fabric of, let's just enjoy greatness, man. Like, do we really need to stack and rack Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Patrick Mahomes, and do all this, or can we just enjoy greatness? And I know that fan bases in general, like, you just went through 2 decades of the Patriots dominating the National Football League, and now you're walking into half a decade of the Chiefs dominating the National Football League, and 30 other fan bases are like, when is it our turn? Like, when can we get a little bit of love? Meanwhile, the Buccaneers and the Rams fan bases are just like, hey, we got one. We got in there a little bit. You know what I mean?
It's not in there, right?
So I get that. You know what I'm saying? But I just, what I don't like is when these conversations turn into trying to downplay another person's greatness to rise up another person's greatness. I've always said, if your person or if the person you're debating for is really that great, you can just stand on that greatness. You don't need to diminish somebody else's shine, because to try to diminish Tom Brady's 7 Super Bowls, look, if Patrick Mahomes wins 10 Super Bowls, that doesn't make Tom Brady winning 7 Super Bowls any less special. And to try to diminish somebody else's shine to make your shine brighter, that's where I don't like these conversations.
Yep, and I did it. This is the barbershop, and I've done that in years. There's more than 2 conversations I wouldn't have. I'm talking about within context here, in terms of competition. I ain't talking about religion, and I ain't talking about politics, but I will tell you the things that we avoided when it comes to side-by-side comparisons. I avoided, and you were like this one, I avoided that top 5 MCs of all time thing because I'm older. You know what I'm saying? Now that I know what I know, David Harrison, the battle rapper, might have been in my top 5. But the other one I always avoided was Michael Jordan and LeBron James, because just think about this. How much of an oxymoron is it for you to be having a Mount Rushmore conversation about athletes and then absolutely destroying the guy that you think is the 5th best guy? For him to even be in that conversation means there ain't nothing to diminish about him and his career. So
but we try to down talk him. You know what I mean? And listen, and I'm not saying the Locked On Chiefs guys are doing this or saying this, but there ain't nobody out there trying to talk about Patrick Mahomes isn't the greatest, or not the greatest, but isn't a GOAT or a great quarterback or one of the greatest of all time. Like, if Patrick Mahomes retired today, he's going in the Hall of Fame.
No doubt. Period. And he's going to have a bunch of people that believe that he is the GOAT. You know what I'm saying? So
if you're trying to compare, I would be saying, okay, there's people who doubt you. There's people who say, no, he's not as good, or no, he's not great, or no, he's not one of the greatest. Then you start comparing because you're like, well, this dude's one of the greatest. Well, guess what Pat Mahomes is doing? Because now you're using somebody else's shine to showcase your other guy's shine, not to diminish the other person's. But nobody's out here on these streets talking about Patrick Mahomes. It actually kind of reminds me when Tom Brady, I can't remember which Super Bowl it was, but he got up after the win. He said, "We're still here." And I was like, bro, nobody thought you were gone. What are you talking about?
Thought you weren't there, right?
Nobody thought you were gone. So, you know what I mean? It kind of reminds me of those types of conversations. But yeah, man, hey, look, I love seeing the Locked On Chiefs guys being a little cocky, being a little,
of course.
feeling
Yeah.
it, feeling a little bit. Hey, man,
Yeah.
talk your talk and do your thing because you got to embrace it while it lasts.
You earned it. And the other thing is when you're so good and so great for so long and people keep saying that you're cheating and you're doing this, sometimes it's time to puff up your chest and say, well, hold up, let me show you, let me remind you who I really am and
Yeah.
allow me to reintroduce myself. So we're going to introduce ourselves to one of the Chiefs' new coaches. I mean, the Lions' new coaches. The Lions, they seemingly lost their whole coaching staff like they just won 3 straight Super Bowls. It's crazy. We don't even let things manifest themselves, but we'll discuss that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Prize Picks. Man, it's about that time. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks. The best place for daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded. Prize Picks makes it fun, simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick of the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks only needs to throw 1 yard to win. How about that one? Pair that with more correct picks and you're cashing out. Download the app today and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, moving along here on Locked On NFL in the barbershop with my man David Harrison, the local expert of the day. And David can kind of sympathize a little bit with Detroit, even though David's team was the reason why Detroit did not advance further in the playoffs. I have a little sympathy for him because, much like a lot of teams, they are going to be victims of people around the NFL having a copycat mentality. But the thing that bothers me about the Detroit Lions is folks are poaching all of their coaches, and they ain't even they ain't even win anything yet. And the continuity has already been broken up because people want whatever Detroit had, and they went somewhere to get a new coach who happens to be an O. And listen to my man Matt Derry from Locked On Lions.
That the Lions have their new offensive coordinator. Is it Hank Fraley? No, it's not. Is it Tanner Engstrand? No, it's not. Scotty Montgomery? Mark Brunell? Nope. It is 55-year-old vagabond assistant John Morton. Yes, you're saying the same thing I'm saying. Who? John Morton, who has been the Denver Broncos passing game coordinator the last couple of years and spent 2022 here in Detroit as a special assistant, is reportedly taking over as offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell, a couple of years ago, was asked about Tanner Engstrand, who, of course, is the Lions pass game coordinator. And this was 2 years ago. He was asked about Engstrand, and he brought up John Morton and said, John Morton, man, quote, Johnny's a superstar now. There's a number of things that he did for us last year, talking about 2022, that are things that we've kept. This is when Morton left to take a job in Denver. And I really feel like that helped Tanner as well. And he took a lot of that and he learned from that. And he's grown from that. So he's in a good spot. He's an asset for us, end quote.
I like what Dan Campbell did here because it's not like he's saying that those guys, his young hitters, aren't capable. It's not about not being capable. This goes back to something that you said that I have stolen. It says we're not trying to solve problems. We're looking for solutions. He went and got the dude that he thought was absolutely the best. I think he got he had the guy's name on a napkin in his pocket the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know a lot of people are kind of like unenthused about the hire and, and all that stuff. And certainly it could go wrong. But I think that, Dan Campbell has earned at least a little bit of good, just trusting him. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but
goodwill. Yeah. He's earned the benefit.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. The benefit of the doubt and all that stuff. But look at the history of this coach, of Coach Morton, right? He has coached quarterbacks like Rich Gannon, Drew Brees, Alex Smith, Derek Carr, Josh McCown, Jared Goff, right, as a senior offensive assistant coach for the Lions, and now Bo Nix. And Bo Nix, probably the most mobile of all of those guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this dude knows how to coach quarterbacks or coach with quarterbacks or on staffs with quarterbacks that don't move around a lot. And that's the thing about Jared Goff. Like, you can want some of these more attractive names and all this other stuff, but I think part of the key is not just understanding who's the right fit for your staff, but also who's the right fit for your personnel. Because unless you plan on moving on from Jared Goff, you need an offensive coordinator that doesn't just know how to be aggressive, which, you look at the history of who this guy has coached with. I think you can expect him to be nice and aggressive. I mean, he comes from the Sean Payton tree to at least a certain extent, and anybody who's watched Sean Payton football knows it's very aggressive. So that's going to fit. But also, he's worked at the quarterback like Jared Goff several times in the past. So the things that Jared Goff can do are going to be things that he knows how to work with. The things that Jared Goff can't do are not going to be things that rattle him and things that cause, that throw him for a loop when he's designing his offense. So that I think is probably a big part of it. Two is making sure that your personnel fit with this new hire, not just in the front office or in the coaching staff, but also in the locker room.
I love it. I love the fact that you're talking about all the guys that he mentioned, and you talk about Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach, who I guess doubles as the run game coordinator or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they go out and do something that is very familiar to them, but is not familiar to the fans. And that's because they have their finger on the pulse. And here's where that continuity also continues to grow. You just heard Derry say, he was here. He taught everybody. He taught Engstrand. He taught them all. He taught it. So now with him walking back in the building, those dudes don't have one iota of hate, jealousy, envy, or anything, because it's almost like saying, your uncle's back. And that's what it is. Yep. Uncle Joe's moving back in. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. Philadelphia, they are very, very self-aware. As a team, they play that way. You saw it firsthand. They play that way. They coach that way. The fans, as wild as they are. I told my boy who roots for the Eagles, here's the irony. Everybody hates Eagles fans, the Boo Birds, but guess what? Everybody's rooting for them now because they want them to beat the Chiefs. So I guess the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But they do a real good job, and Lou DiBiase does a real good job of being self-aware about the importance and of certain people. Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, both still not considered Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but don't overlook them because they know themselves. Check this out.
They do it in a way that we're not used to it. We're not used to elite quarterbacks playing the way that Jalen Hurts does. We're not used to elite coaches being like Nick Sirianni. We're used to the play callers. We're used to the pocket passers that dice up defenses on a consistent basis. Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, they do it different. But not only are they elite, like what they're doing right now is historic. As I mentioned, like with Sirianni and Hurts, what they're doing getting back to multiple championships, especially after losing your first Super Bowl. A lot of the times when you make it to the first one and you don't win it, you don't get back. Jalen and Nick, like they are breaking the trends of NFL history doing what they are doing by getting to Super Bowl 59. They're elite in their own unique way, but elite is elite. And you can't, at this point, like I said on the show yesterday, there's nothing more that you can go after about these two.
I think Nick Sirianni has the chance more than anybody to change what people, the narrative that people have about him is like he's just along for the ride. I think when you start to win hardware and you're consistently showing up, people eventually come around.
I'm not going to. I can tell you this. Listen. What they're doing is elite, 100%, 100%. But you're never going to hear me put right now. You're never going to hear me put Jalen Hurts in elite quarterback conversation. And I'm dang sure. I'm not sure I can say the other word. I'm dang sure not going to put Nick Sirianni in elite head coaching territory, because let's not forget, Nick Sirianni was told, "Go find better coordinators or you're fired." Right? Like,
and they've done that in Philly before, that. Yeah.
Right. Like, this wasn't Nick Sirianni saying, "Let me go make judicious decisions and find the right people and do all." Like, no, like he was given an ultimatum here. And what he did is he went and found an offensive coordinator that doesn't want his hand held, or quite honestly, I don't believe would operate well having his hand held in Kellen Moore, and a defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, that we all already know doesn't want his hand held. And if you try to, he's going to punch you.
Yeah.
So Nick Sirianni, listen, did he hire the right people? Absolutely. And that is where he deserves credit. He hired the right people. But here's where I will give a little bit to what Louis is saying. There's a really big part of leadership that people sometimes fail in, and that is understanding where your weaknesses are and how to adjust to them. Nick Sirianni, from these two hires, is acknowledging that his weakness is in managing his team. Now, it just so happens that that's the main criteria for your job. So your biggest weakness is the primary responsibility you have, but at least you went out and hired the right people to do it. Again, I would give him more credit if he wasn't forced to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're forced to do something, like, bro, like if, like I'm a big dude, so I'll use this because if it offends anybody, I'm talking about myself. But if you're a big dude and you go to like a clinic where they don't let you eat more than like 1,500 calories a day, and then you come out and you lost 100 pounds, listen, I know some of your friends and family are going to be out there with balloons and everything praising you. It ain't going to be me because you didn't do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
You were forced to do it. You know what I'm saying? So that's my thing about Nick Sirianni. Now, can Jalen Hurts change my mind? Absolutely. But here's the problem I have with Jalen Hurts. There are a few quarterbacks in this league that if you give them that offensive line, that running back, those receivers, that tight end, that defense, this isn't even a question. This isn't even like, bro, if Patrick Mahomes has that Eagles roster around him,
Josh Allen,
the Chiefs are favored by 21 points to win the Super Bowl this weekend or coming up. You know what I'm saying? And that's not an exaggeration. Like elite quarterbacks, if you want to be an elite quarterback, you have to elevate those around you. Elite quarterbacks don't need others around them to elevate them. It's great when you have them. It was great when Tom Brady had Randy Moss. Randy Moss helped make Tom Brady better just as much as Tom Brady helped make the Patriots better. But Tom Brady is a quarterback that by that time, and even after the fact established, he is a dude that elevates people. He's elite. Patrick Mahomes, bro, Juju Smith-Schuster and DeAndre Hopkins are about to headline an offense going to the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like that, and those names are great, and I have a lot of respect for what DeAndre specifically has done throughout the course of his career, but D-Hop is not the D-Hop that we knew and drafted in the third round of our fantasy rosters those years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that is an elite quarterback. Jalen Hurts needs AJ, Devontae, Dallas, Saquon, and even with those guys, they can't rely on Jalen. Look at what Kellen Moore has done from the beginning of the season when they went 2-2 to the rest of the season when they started winning. It's been all Saquon. There's a reason Saquon Barkley gets MVP chance at Eagles games is because he is elevating Jalen, not the other way around.
No doubt. No doubt. All right, we talked about all of the winners. Now we got to get into a couple of teams that don't win very much. I did this in the segment yesterday with New York. Now, talking about the Saints and the Cowboys, we're going to get to them in just a second with their coaching staff or with their lack of a coaching staff. We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by TurboTax. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, waiting and wondering some more, that kind of goes away. Now, taxes is matching with TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return. Wow, you get real-time updates on the progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything within 100% accuracy. That's a good thing. Also, you can get the most back guaranteed, no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Don't you want that? Now, this is what taxes is. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates, only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. All right, third segment here with David Harrison of Locked On NFL. David, I know about coaches that take themselves out of the running for jobs. That happened in Jacksonville until it didn't, and that was a big thing last week. The Saints are in a little bit of a different situation because that is a hard job to fill. I'm actually down in Mobile with Ross Jackson, and we were here yesterday when Coach McCarthy took his name out of the running, and now Joe Brady has snatched his name out. Now You're looking at guys like Kellen Moore or maybe some other guys. Maybe they need to open it up to guys who haven't gotten a chance or older guys who have gotten a chance before. But this is a hard situation, and I'm going to let Ross Jackson tell you exactly how hard it is.
You know what's better than the New Orleans Saints hiring Kellen Moore? The New Orleans Saints hiring Kellen Moore and drafting Ashton Ginty. Like I said, what could be better than hiring Kellen Moore as your next head coach? Well, it might be hiring Kellen Moore and getting him the caliber of running back that made his offense so successful in Philadelphia in 2024. We got our mock draft, our fourth kind of coach-centric mock draft. So I got 4 rounds for you. We're going to dive in. That's 6 selections as if Kellen Moore was the head coach. Let's kick this off. So as you know, I'm starting off here, round 1, pick 9 with Ashton Ginty, the running back out of Boise State. Why? Well, first of all, not the only one that's had this idea, by the way. I'm not entirely crazy. My homie over, Trizzy Trace, over at Saints Now. Make sure you go and support him. He's had the same idea too. So I want to make sure I give him a shout out because we're geniuses. I'm sorry. We're just geniuses. So make sure you go and support him as well. But breaking this one down, a big reason why Kellen Moore's offense was so successful in Philadelphia is the fact that that offense had a Saquon Barkley run for 2,000 rushing yards. Now, is your expectation that Ashton Ginty is going to show up and immediately rush for 2,000 rushing yards? Absolutely not. But if you look back at Kellen Moore's offenses across the NFL, with the exception of the Los Angeles Chargers, the years that he spent with the Dallas Cowboys, typically top 10 rushing offenses. The year that he spent with Philadelphia, the number 2 rushing offense in the NFL. And even that 1 year that he did spend in Los Angeles, they were not a successful rushing team. No surprise for the Los Angeles Chargers, but the running backs were often used in the passing game. Over 70 targets for Austin Eckler.
Whoever takes that job is just going to need to play to their strengths. And right now, believe it or not, the strengths in New Orleans, I found this out last night, they like their offensive tackles. They could use maybe a little bit of an upgrade on the line. I think getting a dynamic running back to pair with Alvin Kamara at this stage in his career, it might help them because, David, you're going to laugh, maybe you'll laugh. It indirectly does something that they need to do. They need to take the ball out of Derek Carr's hands probably as much as possible, and they need to limit possessions in games moving forward, whoever that new coach is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, the situation. So first off with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, obviously a very smart offensive mind. I think that's been proven. The thing about Kellen Moore that gives me pause, unfortunately I'm not in this situation, but I was recently in this situation about talking about teams hiring new head coaches. I get a little bit weary when I look at a guy like Kellen Moore, who on the outside has this great reputation. Mm-hmm. Fans get excited about him. Media loves talking about him. You watch these teams perform, and there's great stuff happening. But then you look at the reason his career has taken the path that it has.
Yep. This
young man is not even 40 years old. He's already bounced to 3 different teams as their offensive coordinator. And, there's a spin out there that says he's in such high demand, elite offenses keep pulling him in. That's a spin. But then you also have the viewpoint of, well, the Dallas Cowboys realized that he wasn't going to get them and Dak Prescott over the hump, even with a guy like CeeDee Lamb on the roster. So they said, okay, thanks for your service. And some Cowboys fans will tell you that he was scapegoated. Certainly possible.
Especially there, right?
But then the job that he gets is Los Angeles. And what's curious to me about that is he gets hired by a coach, Brandon Staley, who is literally on a hot seat so hot it's boiling. So he is just desperate. And what is the storyline in Los Angeles? It's Justin Herbert. So Brandon Staley knows I've got to get Justin Herbert to the moon or I'm out of a job. So he goes and hires Kellen Moore. Not anybody else. Kellen Moore doesn't go anywhere else. He goes to one of the most desperate coaching staff situations in the NFL that offseason. Doesn't work. Then he goes to Philadelphia. One of the most desperate coaching staff situations in the NFL. So yes, he looks very, very attractive. But when a guy is only getting jobs in his next 2 stops from desperate head coaches who absolutely need a Hail Mary to save their jobs, do you as a franchise want to take that same Hail Mary? You know what I mean? That's really my question. And then again, the leadership part of it, right? The leadership part of it, which is something that we don't know about, all that stuff. You know what I mean? So there's just that question. So those are just my pauses about Kellen Moore. I'm not saying that Kellen Moore wouldn't be a good head coach, and I love the spin that Ross Jackson puts on the potential of Kellen Moore being the head coach, because I think he nails it, which, you know, Ross always does, so that's not a surprise. But I look at and the reason I give all that thought to Kellen Moore specifically is because this New Orleans Saints job is starting to look a lot like last year's Carolina Panthers job. And that is a terrible place for the Saints franchise to be, because Joe Brady pulled out, Cliff Kingsbury pulled out. These guys who have quote unquote options and are attractive and don't have to settle for a job don't want your job.
And even
I
Mike
think that's
McCarthy,
a problem
who's
for the
not,
Saints organization.
and even McCarthy, who's not that good.
McCarthy, I didn't even mention McCarthy.
He ain't even that guy. He don't have a whole bunch of options. And he said, "No, we'll focus on 20."
McCarthy said, "I'll take my paycheck from the Cowboys and I'll just enjoy the year and I'll study tape and I'll study myself." The last thing I want to say about it, Wig, is this: I think coaches are very quietly showing owners they messed up. I think the coaching fraternity is very quietly having a little bit of a sit-in against NFL owners. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. Why are these coaches passing up these opportunities? We want to say it's because Cliff wants to stay with Jaden. It's because Joe wants to stay with Josh. It's because Ben wanted to stay with the Lions offense. And yes, absolutely, that's got to be a part of it, or else you have no reason to stay, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think also listen, we got 32 billionaires out here that'll fire you in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to fire us in a year, why am I going to come to your house that's a massive mess that you're going to expect me to turn into a model home in a year with limited resources, when I could just stay here in the model home I already live in, maybe get some jewelry? Yep. So I think these coaches are starting to show these owners, look, y'all gotta show us and appreciate that we're taking risks too, right? Like if Kellen Moore's first head coaching job is this New Orleans Saints job, where he's married to Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara has not been a 1,000-yard rusher in his entire career, and you've got very limited cash resources, and the only way to free up those cash resources is to release talent, right? So now you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Kellen Moore is going to need to know, or Joe Brady or Cliff Kingsbury or Mike McCarthy's going to need to know, I'm not going to be fired after a year. I'm not going to be run out of town after a year for not cleaning up the mess you gave me immediately, because the only person that's going to take that job is a person who knows the only house I'm getting is a dirty one. So I might as well take it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So anyway.
We got about a minute here. I want to talk about Dallas real quick. Dallas is doing something very familiar. Coach Schottenheimer I like his press conference, by the way, but Schotty is the head coach. He's formerly the offensive coordinator. And then Matt Eberflus is back as the defense coordinator. Of course, he was there before he went to the Colts back in the day as the linebackers coach. What do you think about Dallas? Speaking of hot messes that you have to come in and fix.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be another example. I look at it, I think the way a lot of people look at it. Dak Prescott said himself, my future is tied to Brian Schottenheimer. Well, guess what? Brian Schottenheimer's future is tied to Dak Prescott. I think that if this thing doesn't go well in year one, they're both gone.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no doubt about it. We'll be taking a look at it. We'll probably look at that a little bit further, the Dallas Cowboys situation, because it's always so funny, especially when they ain't winning, man. They come up with all kinds of stuff and tell you how it's going to be, man. But we do that here on Locked On NFL. Make sure you tap in twice a day. Tyler rolling early in the morning. It's like a double shot of espresso. And, of course, right here in the barbershop, we just lay it out, lay back, and get all up in everybody's business. For David Harrison, Tony Wiggins, we'll see you later here on Locked On NFL. Thanks for joining.